What up, Fightful fam? Player 1, Shakiel Mahjouri. Player 2, Aaron the Brain Bronsteter. Back again from TSN, squeezing me in on a very busy week ahead of UFC 257. How's it going, dude?
I'm good, man. Hey, thank you for having me on. Happy to be player 2 to your player 1.
Yes.
If I beat you, though, do I get to change sides or?
This is not Between the Links. this is my
show. I got confused. We're not on Between the Links right now? I was waiting to see who I was. Okay.
Shout out to Mike Heck. Shout out to MMA Fighting. All right, guys, before we get into the meat of this is 1-2 Punch. If you're a fan of the show, you know how we roll. If it's your first time, it's news talk, but on a win-lose-draw system. What that means is we're going to assign the week's biggest winners, the week's biggest losers, before drawing up a little preview for UFC 257. I'll hit this animated intro. Snazzy stuff. And there we go. Aaron, first things first. You can't really see it on the stream as much because of the way this layout is, but you've been grilling me about my backdrop. It's a work in progress, but what do you think about the swords as an addition to the collection?
It's a little bit busy. You got to keep it simple, although my backdrop's pretty busy as well, but you got to keep it simple. I like the swords, though. I'll give it to you. I like the swords.
We'll see. I'll show you the final
Are the swords
product.
As valuable as the one in Dana White's office, or are they from legitimate samurais?
One of them is, but the one that is actually off camera because it's too heavy to fit on the rack.
All right.
Aaron, there are two people's approvals in this world that I can never quite live up to. My father's and yours, but I'm going to get there. I'm confident about it.
Me and Mr. Mahjouri set a high bar.
Yes, you really do. Okay, guys, before we get started, quick reminder, if you could please hit subscribe, tap that notification bell, leave a like on this video. All those things go a tremendous way to helping us do what we do over at Fightful MMA. And if you're feeling extra generous, a little super chat donation really warms the heart on a cold day in Vancouver. That's enough of me shilling, Aaron. Let's get to it. Normally we start this with the winners, but I think I'm going to flip the format a little bit because there is a big loser that just came out in the last few hours. Ottman Azaitar officially canned from the UFC after he was allegedly caught sneaking in people from outside the Fight Island bubble into Fight Island. What do you make of that situation?
Well, you buried the lead. They were also scaling the building with a mysterious bag to give him,
I just
apparently. So Ottman Azaitar, unfortunately, no longer with the UFC. Good fighter, too, undefeated.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I guess you can't be cutting your wristbands off, bringing out outside people, and then when security tries to have a word with them, they refuse to comply and leave. I guess that marks the end of a very short UFC tenure for Ottman Azaitar. I believe he only had 2 fights in the UFC, but certainly not a good day for Mr. Azaitar today.
So, what do you think is the mindset here? Because listen, I've done this kind of stuff at resorts, at all inclusives. I've seen it done at music festivals, but he must have known how big of a risk he was taking, or do you think it was just completely over his head? Like, really, when you assess the risk reward here, what would compel you to do such a thing?
I don't really know, and I don't know how involved he was. I don't have a ton of details on it other than what we've heard so far today. He was in the middle of cutting weight, and it did not look like a fun weight cut based on his Instagram story, which has since been taken down. He was cutting weight and did not look good. Mm-hmm. But I don't know when this whole thing transpired, because if he was in the midst of cutting weight, that means that it must have been something that happened very, very close to weigh-in time in order for him to actually get removed from the card and subsequently the promotion itself. People don't realize how big the Azaitar brothers are in Morocco. I believe Ottman Azaitar has nearly 1 million followers on Instagram. Wow. These guys are a pretty big deal in Morocco, and they're very well connected with the heads of government there. I think I don't know if it's a monarchy system there, but they're pretty well connected with the heads of government in Morocco and are very, very famous there. So this actually is a pretty significant hit to the African market for the UFC, because Morocco, I believe, is a place that they're trying to really make inroads into, and losing Ottman Azaitar is probably not great for just how much they would want to satiate that market because of how big those guys are there. But obviously consequences for actions and whatnot. But be that as it may, no longer on the card. Thankfully, they were able to salvage both his opponent and the opponent of Nasrat Haqparast and get them a fight. Yes. So, Matt Frevola had a terrible year in 2020, had 3 different fights scheduled, all of which got canceled for an array of reasons. So for him to travel all the way to Abu Dhabi and then potentially not get a fight, that probably would have been devastating for him, because there's really no substitute for in-cage time. And now that he gets to face Tsarukyan, plus get 20% of Tsarukyan's purse because Tsarukyan missed weight, not too shabby for Matt Frevola.
Yeah, sort of an unexpected bonus there. Last thing on this, we know that Dana White, as of late, has been what's the right word here before I get some sort of media pass invoked. He has not been too happy with the way the MMA media has sort of depicted him throughout the length of this pandemic. I will say, credit where credit is due. I think Dana White responded perfectly to this situation with Ottman. Do you think the punishment kind of fit the crime here? Was it too much firing him? What would you have done if you were in Dana White's shoes?
Yeah, I think that the punishment probably fits the crime, because we're talking about health and safety here.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why they've created such a secure bubble, and they've made sure that everybody that's coming in is vetted and has had their tests and everything, is so that people from the outside can't get in. That's why it's called the bubble, right? Once you're in the bubble, and nobody else is getting in. So to breach that, I think is a pretty significant deal. Like, that's a pretty big deal, all things considered. So I think that's probably the right thing to do based on what we understand of the circumstances.
Yes, I think that's fair. Let's move on. I want to do a little reflection back to UFC Fight Island 7. Calvin Kattar, kind of got the Brian Ortega treatment in the main event fight against Max Holloway, and I want to give a lot of credit to Calvin Kattar, not just on his durability and his ability to sort of come back from a terribly difficult round 4, as well as he did under the circumstances. But he mentioned, I think in interviews, either him or his coach Tyson Chartier, that, I'm not in this to be tough. And it's the sort of, when we have fights like this, we give so much credit to the guy for being tough, for being durable, for having heart. But I like where Calvin Kattar's mindset is at, in the sense of, he doesn't want to be known for being a tough guy. He wants to be known for being the best fighter in the world at 145 pounds. Where do you think Kattar goes from here? Because it was obviously a rough week for him in terms of the fight itself, but have we sort of seen the best of Calvin, or do you expect him to bounce back in a strong way?
Well, for starters, I hope he takes some time off. I mean, I think that he fought 2 or 3 times last year, and he's really made a name for himself for being a top guy at featherweight. And I mean, just because you lose to Max Holloway doesn't mean you're not a top guy at featherweight. Max Holloway, I think, on any 145er on the planet would have probably had the same thing happen to them. Max was just in the zone. He was in flow. And I mean, my 2 favorite stats are that he had more significant strikes than any 2 fighters have combined for in UFC history in a single fight, which is pretty unbelievable. And the stat that I dug up, which was that he strikes in that fight than either Zhang Weili or Davison Figueiredo, the 2 champions of the lightest weight classes in the UFC, which means lower finishing rates, have landed their entire careers. So I mean, that just goes to show that kind of output. And where Calvin goes from here, I think there's a lot of really good fights for him, regardless at 145. He probably is going to have to work his way back up, and hopefully this fight doesn't take as much of a toll on him as it possibly could. As people might think that it will. A lot of fighters don't absorb that many strikes in their entire career that he did over the course of those 5 rounds.
Yes.
And that's something that's really important to consider. I think you're talking about like champions. Like I'm sure there are certain champions that have not taken that much, had that much, and I'm talking retired champions even that have had that many strikes landed on them in their career. So hopefully he fights another day. And I mean, Calvin Kattar said you can't stop the guy that doesn't quit, and I think that's a good way of putting it. That just seems to be his attitude. And like you said, being considered tough, I'm sure that's a nice badge of honor, but that's not why they play this game. They don't want a participation trophy. They want to be the champion. And I think that Calvin Kattar will continue to make that his laser focus.
See, this is why I call you the brain. Aaron digging up facts the way my damn dog digs up the backyard. And you did cut out for a little bit, so just in case I want to miss it, I want to double check here. You were saying that in that one fight, Max Holloway landed more significant strikes than Weili Zhang and Davison Figueiredo have landed in their entire MMA careers or UFC careers?
UFC careers, individually in their UFC careers. And I mean, I sent that out, and people are like, "Why are you slagging Zhang and Figueiredo?" I said, well, Figueiredo. I mean, it's if anything, it's a testament to how fast Warlley became the champion, and B, how much finishing power Davis and Figueiredo has for such a small frame. So
it's the double-edged sword of this living is interacting with certain fans on Twitter.
No, but if that was their opinion that I had diminished those two, that certainly isn't my intent, and I understand where they're coming from, but I figured I'd give them an explanation.
All right, fair enough. I appreciate your cordial behavior on social media. Aaron, are there any losers you want to highlight before we start shifting this conversation to the winners?
Well, I thought that Mounir Lazzez kind of laid an egg on Wednesday's card. He was in the co-main event. This is somebody that one of Dana White's son's friends had discovered, I believe, and showed. Yeah, they showed Dana White a video of this guy and said, you should sign this guy, give him a shot in the UFC. He was doing good things on the regional circuit in the UAE and in Arabia, pretty much. And is Arabia a thing you can say? Middle East? I don't know. I know that
I was born in Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
I'm not talking about you. I'm just I don't hear the word Arabia mentioned outside of like Disney movies and
well, cinema. UFC Arabia is the YouTube
UFC
channel
Arabia
now. Shout out to Farah Hanoun.
So in the Middle East, basically, like he's put in a lot of good work in the Middle East for I believe for UAE Warriors and I think it was Brave as well. But so basically they signed him. He had a great performance in his first fight against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, and I think then, big expectations. He was a big favorite against Warlley Alves and just got obliterated. So I'd say that he did not have a very good week.
We got someone asking about the fight start times. Main card, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. Do you know when the prelims start?
I believe it's probably at 7 p.m. rather, because of one of the fights being taken off.
My guess 4 p.m. Pacific. Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right, let's move on to the winners. Before we do, guys, quick reminder: subscribe, notification bell, like button. Go check out UFC fighters and abroad reacting to Conor McGregor's trash talk. That video is doing decent numbers for us. Of course, our Street Beefs reaction videos are killing it as well. So thank you guys for keeping the channel going. Winner, chicken dinner. There's so many to talk about, and I think the entire UFC 257 main card and all the fighters top to bottom who are still competing, it's a big win for them, an enormous card. We're going to get to that in the preview section, but let's start with probably the biggest winner of the last 6-ish days, Max Holloway. It's incredible. It's incredible what a guy can do, because here you have Max coming off of 2 very close fights against Alex Volkanovski, but as far as the official records are concerned, he came up short in both occasions. And then he goes out and puts on the sort of beating on Calvin Kattar that has you thinking, maybe he is better than the champ. Can you think of another time where a guy has lost twice to the reigning champion and could possibly come in as a small favorite?
No, not really. I mean, maybe Gray Maynard, although he lost twice to Frankie, but only one was in a championship fight. I don't know. I mean, BJ Penn? No, BJ Penn after he lost to Frankie didn't do much. I don't know. I don't think so.
It's rare.
Honestly, I don't think so.
Do you think so?
How many people have lost twice to a champion in general, right? Exactly. Like you don't have a huge sample size.
Yeah. Dana White was pretty adamant about making that rematch should Volkanovski dispatch of Brian Ortega. That card's set for early March
26th.
Yes, March 26th. I had been saying going into UFC Fight Island 8 that that the best case scenario for Max Holloway is for Brian Ortega to win the title, because Volkanovski doesn't have enough of a title run to warrant an immediate rematch. And you have Max Holloway in the wings, who's obviously a fan favorite, a fighter's favorite, and a Dana White favorite. Should they make this rematch, Volkanovski, Max Holloway, if all things pan out, is that the fight you would like to see next for the title? Like, how do you feel about Max being reinserted into the title conversation so soon?
Well, right now there's nobody else standing out, right? And I think that Max, because there were so many questions about the second fight with Volkanovski, that there's an appetite for the third fight. And Volkanovski, there's a misconception about Volkanovski. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, Volkanovski says he doesn't want to fight Max again. He's kind of, that ship has kind of sailed." That's not what he said. What he said was that he wants a different opponent. He wants to face a new challenge. So now he's getting a new challenge. He's getting Brian Ortega. He never said that. He never closed the door on ever facing Max Holloway again. I'm sure he was very impressed with Max Holloway's performance and would love to show that he can beat that guy that just landed 450 plus significant strikes against Calvin Kattar. So I think that is the fight to make, regardless of the outcome of the championship fight.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. Very quickly, going into the chat, someone's wondering if you have any more information on Ottman's situation.
I've heard what you've heard. I've heard the clip from Dana White, and that's the extent of what I know.
That's the extent of it. Okay. Are there any other winners you want to highlight? We can go kind of back and forth on these ones.
Any other winners that I would like to highlight?
It's been such a
Warlley
busy
Alves.
week. Warlley Alves.
Yeah, Warlley Alves.
Okay, wait. Warlley Alvarez, what a tremendous call out. So when he calls out Nate Diaz at UFC Fight Island 8, you're like, whatever. I just want to pull up this headline that someone over at Fightful wrote. Shout out to our great writer, Colby. Quote, marijuana guy Nate Diaz is a bad example, says Warlley Alvarez. I had no appetite for this fight until it turned into a dare.
He stole that from Khabib. Khabib was talking about Nate Diaz. He goes, he's marijuana guy. That was a Khabib line.
Yes,
but it's been bogarted by
here.
Yeah. Exactly.
Listen, I'm all for putting Nate Diaz in fights against people who are anti-substance.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the Dare program taking on Nate Diaz. But,
exactly.
Yeah, but
so tell me about Alves. Yeah, tell me about Alves and why he's a big winner to you.
Because he was such a big underdog against Lazzez, and everybody was kind of touting Lazzez as this next big thing. And people kind of forgot about how vicious Warlley Alves is, and he just reminded everybody about how he is one of the more aggressive fighters in the UFC and what he can do, what he is capable of doing. And to do that as a 2-1 underdog, I think in a co-main event spot was certainly good. And another winner I'd like to highlight is Michael Chiesa. That was supposed to be a very close fight, and it wasn't. It was not a close fight. Michael Chiesa won that basically from start to finish. So kudos to him. I think that.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what do you think Chiesa's upper potential is here? Because for me, in some ways, that fight kind of left more questions than answers. I think it's badass that he calls out Colby Covington and says, I'm calling him out because I think he's the hardest matchup for me. And looking at the people ranked against Chiesa, I kind of agree because Colby's got way higher striking output, way more confident in his hands and feet, and is, in theory, just as much, if not a bigger, offensive wrestling threat. Chiesa's style, do you think it can succeed at the absolute highest level of this division?
Well, let's do a little bit of matchmaking, I think, at welterweight. This is the way that I would like to see things play out. I would like to see, of course, Burns versus Usman's booked. Mm-hmm. I would like to see the winner of Edwards and Chimaev get the next title shot. I know that it might be a little bit fast for Chimaev, but I'd like to see the winner of that fight get the next title shot.
I think that's fair.
I'd like to see Chiesa face Demian Maia next. I'd like for Demian Maia's retirement fight, I'd like to see Chiesa face Maia. And the reason for that is because I think that way we can really see what Chiesa has on the feet. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's the big question mark about Chiesa. Because I don't think Chiesa is going to be taking Demian Maia down. I don't think that would be a great strategy, although Maia off his back isn't necessarily the most dangerous, but he's certainly dangerous in terms of scrambles. And I'd like to see Colby versus Masvidal. I think that's a fight that's been
for sure
getting cooked up for some time. So, and maybe the winner of Masvidal, like if Colby ends up beating Masvidal or vice versa in definitive fashion, maybe that's who gets the next title shot. But here's the thing. Usman has beaten Edwards. He's beaten Covington. He's beaten Masvidal, right? I would like to see a fresh challenge for him, and I'd like to see if Chiesa is up for that. I'd like to see if Chiesa is up for the challenge. Another one I like is perhaps if you want to keep Maia in the conversation, you do a Maia Wonderboy fight. I think that would be a really interesting one as well, just because of how cool of a stylistic matchup that would be. So there are a lot of options at 170 that I think we can put together.
I really like the idea of Chiesa Maia because, like you said, it helps answer some questions about Chiesa, as well as it potentially gives Damian Maia a more winnable fight to retire on than perhaps some of the other threats in that division. Okay. Let's bookend this as we move into our last 10 minutes. We're not going to go too long today, guys, just a heads up. Winner if you're Dana White, I guess. Loser if you're a pirater of UFC content. This has been like the most fascinating side story. Listen, I love a card that has, and I always say this, Coach Kavanaugh might go on Twitter and drag Zane Simon a bloody elbow through the mud for his stance on what an interesting fight card is. For me, as a pro wrestling fan growing up, It's all about substance and storytelling. I don't care if you have the best fighters on the card top to bottom, if there's nothing at stake beyond winners and losers, bonus money, etc. But when you look at this main card, there's a lot of intriguing factors. Obviously, the return of Conor McGregor, a road to redemption for Dustin Poirier, fight for charity. Like, there's just so much to digest there. Michael Chandler getting the red carpet rolled out for him, unlike most other champions from other organizations that we've seen enter the UFC. And there's a bunch of other interesting ones. Even honestly, Matt Frevola, Arman Tsarukyan, just the fact that these two guys were not matched up before, it adds a little bit of spice. But my favorite is Dana White versus the streamers. He says in an interview, I think with BT Sport, that they've tracked down one potential pirater.
His phones.
That they've tapped into his phone lines. They're monitoring his house. I have so many questions, but the first one for you, Aaron, is: do you think Dana White is serious that he's gone through all of this?
Well, I do, because I think that he's picking his battle here. He's not going after the streaming industry or the IPTV industry or anything. He's found a guy. He's found a target. This was a guy that I think called Dana out on Instagram and said he was going to stream the event. And Dana White has focused all of his attention on this guy. You know, I find it weird, though. People have this really, like, unabashed propensity for bragging about streaming events. Like, if you went into Champs Sport and grabbed a pair of Jordans, would you go on Twitter and be like, I grabbed a pair of Jordans from Champs Sports at the mall, at this particular mall? It's like, but people are like, here's a link to the stream, and I'm just going to stream this event. Yeah, you're not going to get my money. I'm streaming the event. You do realize that is stealing, and that people can figure out what your name is. Like, you're not that hidden. Yeah. Like, I mean, maybe you're on a VPN and you have a moniker on Twitter and you don't have your picture, but there are very easy ways for people to figure out who you are, and it's very easy to see who is streaming events and who is sharing streams and who is, which websites are there. And I know the UFC have an entire department that focuses on that. They have a specific segment of their department that focuses on that. If you're going to stream a fight, it's probably not in your best interest to try to bait Dana White into finding you. Yeah. It's just not a smart move. And Dana White says, like, I like having enemies and I like battles. Don't bait Dana White. Believe me, as somebody who's spoken to Dana White on many occasions, baiting Dana White is never a clever move. It's never smart, and it's not something you should do, because he will win. Like, he will get the last laugh, and he has the money and legal team to make your life a complete living hell. That I don't know from experience, and I don't wish to know from experience. No, and that's why I say you should pick your battles with Dana White. Yeah. So is any of this to this very brave streamer? Yeah, not a good idea.
So he's saying that he's done all these things, which leads me to ask: if Dana White and the UFC are collecting this information, they've wiretapped this guy, is any of that admissible in court? Because I don't know that if they don't have a warrant, they haven't legally obtained any of this information, correct?
I don't know. From what I understand, a lot of these people that have been caught streaming and have been given these really kind of big fines, they never really end up paying the fines. A lot of the time they have to write a handwritten, they have to write an apology. Or they have to, but I can't find a lot of instances where people that are busted for streaming events, whether it's sharing a stream or a streaming event, have actually ended up having to go through all of the, all of the different penalties that they are given. I mean, I'm sure there have been some instances, and I know there have been some people that have gone to jail. I think the guy who had mega share or whatever, I forget what it was called. Well, that Kim.com guy, I think he ended up going to jail or was supposed to be charged with something. But a lot of these people, I've seen interviews with a lot of the ones that the UFC specifically have gone after. They said they never paid, but they ended up having to apologize or whatever. But it seems Dana White is quite adamant on this one individual really paying the piper in this instance, and they can make them pay. They just have to continue to follow through with the legal system, and then they have also, I mean, if that person declares bankruptcy or something, I think that's probably still a win for the legal team. But again, I just don't advise people to do this. I don't advise people to try to bait Dana White into a
no, don't bait
a war of any sort of war.
Yeah, this whole thing's kind of bizarre to me. I think there's studies that show that most of the people who are watching streams would not pay for the content either way. That there's possibly an upside to the additional exposure that you get from people watching your content.
But this is the thing. They're not really going after, at least in these instances, the people that are streaming the events. They're going after the people that are
Hosted,
sharing the streams and making the streams and putting the streams out there.
Yes.
Which is a better target. I mean,
it is.
You want to go after those are the people that you have more of a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
And now that one of the last things that went through in the Trump administration as part of the stimulus bill at the end had writing in the legislature that said that people can now be prosecuted with a felony if they are caught providing streams, like building streams for events that where they're making money off of them.
Gotcha. This has definitely been an interesting saga, but we do have to start wrapping up. So I want to touch on two other things. First, the co-main event, Michael Chandler, Dan Hooker. This is super interesting to me, and I've got kind of two prevailing theories I'd like to get your thoughts on. We've seen champions from other organizations enter the UFC, and some find a lot of success. Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, Marlon Moraes. Some, like Will Brooks, fall a little short of expectations. And it's in the cases of Eddie and Marlon, I didn't see them really roll out the red carpet the way they have for Michael Chandler. I think they did a little bit with Justin Gaethje, giving him a headlining slot on a fight night against Michael Johnson. I have two theories here. I'd like to see which one you think is sort of more likely. One, that because they put him in this Khabib Justin backup role, that they had to build him up in the event that he fell in short notice. The other, have the UFC just kind of learned their lesson that these guys from other organizations can be a big deal, and that by not giving them the proper build-up, you risk them potentially upsetting a potential star of your own like Dan Hooker?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, the latter statement that you made, because I think that what's the harm in building Michael Chandler up and making him big? Because honestly, if you look at Michael Chandler's resume in the last 4 years, it really doesn't blow anybody away. You know, you've got like a win over Brett Primus. You've got a win over Goichi Yamauchi. You've got a win over Sydney Outlaw. You know, we're not talking about guys that are even top 20 lightweights in the world. He lost to Patricio Pitbull in the first round, got knocked out. That's the highest level he fought. He got a nice win over Benson Henderson in his final fight in Bellator. I'm eager to see how he does against the top 5 caliber lightweight in the UFC in Dan Hooker. I think that this is going to be a really, really big test, because I think Dan Hooker is going to win that fight. I don't think that Michael Chandler has faced anybody the caliber of Dan Hooker, or beaten anybody the caliber rather of Dan Hooker in several years. And Dan Hooker has fought well against a lot of top guys. And when I asked Chandler himself, like, who do you think are the worst matchups for you of the top guys? I named all the top guys at lightweight. He said Dan Hooker probably. He said Dan Hooker's not a great matchup for me. He's long, he's rangy. He throws good knees for entering fighters that are trying to get entry on him. I think that I will be very impressed if Michael Chandler wins.
I agree.
I'll just leave it at that.
People who listen to this show, I've said this 12.5 times by now, but I think there's a bit of a through line between these champions from other organizations when they enter the UFC. I think Michael Chandler is probably going to lose on Saturday, but that's not to say he can't be UFC champion. It's only to say you saw it with Eddie Alvarez, you saw it with against Donald Cerrone, you saw it with Marlon Moraes against Rafael Assunção, and you almost saw it with Justin Gaethje versus Michael Johnson. There's a bit of a calibration period that happens when you enter the UFC, where you might be UFC championship material, but you haven't quite faced the kind of test that Chandler is going to face against Hooker. And I think he's going to need that first tough fight, and probably a loss, to kind of get his bearings and understand the sort of adjustments he needs to make. Because the Justin Gaethje that fought Michael Johnson, we did not think that guy was going to be a UFC lightweight interim champion. But look at the adjustments he made once he got his footing in the UFC. And I expect Chandler to make a similar sort of transition in the long run. Hopefully.
Maybe, but it depends on how much time he has, right? He's 35, 36 years old. So he just doesn't have a ton of time to make those adjustments, whereas Gaethje was a bit younger. Alvarez at the time was a bit younger. So that's one thing to watch, is just how many 35-year-olds on the planet can hang with these guys that are at the top of the lightweight division, right? Like it's not a matter of just how good he is, because I think that Michael Chandler 5-6 years ago could have hung with all these guys. But I'll catch up to you.
Okay. We'll see what happens. A last thing, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, obviously our big headliner. Man, there's a lot of interesting caveats to this fight and sort of what happens as a consequence. Okay, if Khabib were to and I don't think he is. I think Dana White's just throwing a Hail Mary here. If Khabib were to return to fight anyone in the lightweight division, what outcome on Saturday night do you think would most likely coerce him into a fight?
I don't think anything that happens this Saturday is going to make him want to come back. The one thing I keep saying is the one thing I think that might make him come back, and it probably wouldn't be this year, it would probably be next year. Mm-hmm. If Charles Oliveira starts blowing through people and people start saying, if Khabib takes this guy down, he would get subbed, no problem. That's when you start to have doubts. People start to have doubts about how good Khabib could do against someone like this. Because Charles Oliveira, to me, is a terrible matchup for Khabib. And I said this since November of 2019. I tweeted it out. I said, we're never going to see this fight, but stylistically, I'd love to see Charles Oliveira against Khabib. And people kind of laughed at me. They're like, oh, what are you talking about? Now we see where Charles Oliveira's at. But that's the matchup. I think that's the one where people could really question, can Khabib beat this guy based on his particular skill set? And that's what it's about. It's about matchups, right? Now, if Conor ends up beating Poirier inside 30 seconds and calls out Khabib and says, and tries to convince the world that the Conor that fought Khabib the last time isn't the best Conor, maybe. I'm still not convinced, though.
I think Luke Thomas made a good point on Thursday's morning combat that I think if Conor's going to call out Khabib, he can do it with a bit of bravado, but he has to keep it respectful, because I don't think Khabib is interested in engaging in the sort of circus that was the build-up to their first fight. Last question for you here. I think at the surface, it's very easy to say that Conor McGregor has more to lose here just because he is obviously the bigger fighter. He's the money machine for the UFC. But in terms of career trajectory from this point out, who has more to lose? Because if Conor loses, there's still a lot of big fights you can make because he's always a draw, right? That Nate Diaz fight is like a VIP pass. That fight is always going to make sense no matter where these two guys are at in their career. Whereas if Dustin Poirier falls short a second time, and this is the best Dustin Poirier, the best version of the Diamond, one that's not young and brash and has Conor McGregor in his head, it might sort of be the peak of his long-term potential. Where do you think both these guys go with a loss potentially?
Well, here's the thing about Poirier, and if he were to lose this fight, there's no title on the line. So you look at the different matchups for Poirier beyond this. If Gaethje ends up becoming champion, Poirier can make an argument that he should get a shot at Gaethje because he's beaten Gaethje. If Hooker somehow becomes the champion, same deal. If Oliveira becomes the champion, Poirier's never faced him. And if Conor ends up beating him for a second time and Conor becomes the champion, then you can say, well, Poirier's going to have to wait, or he's going to have to really work his way back up. That's, I think, the caveat. Whereas with Conor, I mean, if Conor loses to Poirier, he's going to, like you said, continue to get big fights, continue to have tough opponents, continue to get the opportunity to work himself up to a championship bout. They're not going to give up on Conor because he's lost to Dustin Poirier. Not to mention that he'd probably get a rematch at Poirier right away because of look at what happened with Nate Diaz, right? Like if Poirier ends up winning over the course of 5 rounds or ends up stunning him with a choke in the second round or something along those lines, there's still going to be an appetite to see a trilogy fight because it's 1-1 at that point. So I actually do believe that Poirier probably has more to lose, but it's not by much. Like, Poirier can still bounce back. We've seen him bounce back in the past, and we've seen how good this guy is. That's the big difference between the first fight and this fight. Is like the first fight, there was so much hype behind Conor. He was the next big thing, and you have all this pressure of stopping that guy to prove that he's not the next big thing. I'm better than he is. Everybody thinks they're better than the next big thing. We have 2 established elite fighters right now, where nobody's going to argue that either of them is not elite after a loss. I think that's where we're at. So I think that both of them could be comfortable in their own skin, regardless of the outcome of this fight.
Yes, this is chef's kiss matchmaking. I'm so excited for this main card in particular. Aaron, I'm gonna let you go. I know you got so much on your plate today. Let people know what they can expect from you, from TSN, in the next few days of coverage and beyond, whatever you want.
Well, the next few days, now it's starting to slow down. I mean, you can see me on Periscope with Dan Tom. Before tomorrow night's event, we do a breakdown. It's mostly focused on the betting aspect of things and matchups. So you can check that out. You can just follow me on Twitter at Aaron Bronsteter. You can see that there. I'll be on SportsCenter a couple times tomorrow in Canada, so you can check that out. And if you want to watch those videos, I will be tweeting them out as well. So really, I mean, anything that I'm going to be doing will be up on my social media. So feel free to just follow me there. And then next week, I'm hoping to take a couple of days off because this has been a long week. A long week.
That's actually important to mention. I'll get to it in a second, actually. Did you see I saw like an 8-second snippet that Brendan Shaw posted in which it seemed that Eminem was just going in on Dana White.
Yeah.
Do we have any more context on that?
I was looking for the video, like the full interview, and I can't find it anywhere. No. Basically, the line he said was, and I've watched it like 80 times because I was trying to find the entire clip on YouTube. It basically said, like, your opinion doesn't matter because anytime you try to diminish your fighters, you're hurting your own league or something along those lines, right? Like, that's kind of what it was.
No, that's it.
It was weird.
I wanted to run a story, but there just wasn't enough to really go off of there.
B-Rabbit is back, baby.
I love it.
Rap battle time.
That's so funny to me. Okay. That is all, guys. Just a programming note. I will be taking a vacation from Monday, January 25th till Thursday, February 4th. So there will be no episode of 1-2 Punch next Friday. Maybe we'll put up a highlights clip video. Either that or it'll just be barren. But in terms of content, still your regular release schedule. We'll have videos probably Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday next week. We got another Street Beefs reaction video coming out and a bunch of other goodies. So plenty of video content here. The team over at Fightful MMA will be handling all the news, so follow all of them. They do great work over there. And yeah, that's it. One final reminder, guys, if you can please hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, leave a like on this video. Man, we're shooting up very quickly, so that's helping so much. And I gotta thank Aaron Bronsteter for showing me that this is the outro of all outros. For Fightful MMA, I'm Shakiel Mahjouri, and stay tuned for everything Fightful and so delightful. Peace out.